How long do you want to drive?
All right. Thanks, guys, for your patience. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Infanzon. I am a grad student at Villanova University and part of the Interfaith Conference here at BYU. But I want to share a little bit about myself before I get into my case study, which is on faith and politics, a cohort that we have at Villanova. Oh no. Okay. So I actually am a BYU grad. I graduated here in 2018. Yeah, I was here a few years ago. Feels like time goes really fast. I feel like I was just here yesterday. But I went to BYU, and then I am originally from Philadelphia, but grew up out east. Really wanted to come out west to experience BYU, as like many of our conference people here have said. It's a really cool campus, and I was really excited to be a part of it, and I'm really proud to be a BYU grad. So after I went to BYU, I got a job working for the LDS Church in Salt Lake City. So I worked for a few years in the Self-Reliance and Welfare Department as a project manager. I had a really cool opportunity to travel, so we went to Mexico City for a work trip, and I got to visit places all over the country for the work. And while I was at the church, I was on a project working with the Interfaith projects. And so that kind of started something in me a little bit that very much grew into my passion today. But something that I always cared about is diversity, and I think we're all aware at BYU and Utah there's a little bit of a bubble, and so as much fun as I was having being at BYU and then working, like I shared with you before, the group ended up being a very multi-faith group. What ended up happening with our group this first go-round was it became very monopolitical. We started off with a certain group of people, and as we got to know each other, we recognized that we were all sharing some commonalities with our political stance, and there were one or two who had a different one. And they ended up not coming back. They like slowly left the group in a very awkward way. And we recognized as a team, like, we think that they were not feeling like they had the space to be here. So that is like one of the hugest challenges that we are working through is how do you make space for different ideologies? And for me, like one of the things that feels like it's coming up is that I've been learning through this conference. You can't pretend to be neutral in a group like this. Like, you can't pretend that the group itself is neutral. Like, we have to be transparent on what the ideologies of the people forming the group are, and like what the goal is. If we're trying to get different groups together, or if it was like kind of subtly, like we were more comfortable talking about some political things that we all agreed on. And so we weren't always as good about addressing like the other opinion. So that's something we truly need to work on. We have groups on campus who are very clearly of like the opposite political ideology, and the hope is to get them in these conversations. But that's a hard challenge to like get them to want to join in. And then the last thing was, we had a lot of really great dialogue, but the students at the end of the experience said it wasn't as action-based as they wanted. So that's also a balance, because in my experience, interfaith work is a slow work. It's a very slow-moving process. You can't just jump in and like want to make the changes really fast. You have to learn about each other and build that trust, and so that takes a while. But how do we bring in this piece of action? Because we were like visiting these different churches and temples, and we were learning about these religions. We were bringing people in to talk about it, but then they were like having this growing desire to do something about what those divides or gaps that they were seeing in their experiences. So that's it. And then I added this to my presentation just because it is something, again, I've learned through this conference that I really loved, is this idea of how do we find that third thing to focus on. What that basically means is, I think one of the things I've noticed in interfaith work is sometimes you are so directly discussing it, like, what's your identity and what's my identity, and like, let's face each other and talk about it. And that can be really vulnerable and personal. And again, because of that, like, you have to really build that trust. I think a way into interfaith work is focusing on a third thing, which has been shared, things like service, things like art and music, food, something that like we can all face and be like, hey, we're all comfortable with food and art, we all like that. And someone said in their presentation yesterday, I absolutely love this, they said, art has the capacity to hold tension and ambiguity, like better than anything. I loved that, because it just reminded me, like, you can look at this third thing, you can discuss it, and it can hold that ambiguity, it can hold the different interpretations without it feeling like an attack. So that was another thing that we learned. That is basically all I have to share with you guys. I do want to leave a little time for discussion and to ask you guys what you think we could be doing to improve. So I'm going to invite you guys to talk with a partner and discuss for a little bit. What are some of the risks and opportunities that you see when faith and politics meet in interfaith spaces? So take a few minutes to like talk with the people around you and share what you think. for the last couple minutes we have, do we have anyone who wants to share something that they talked about in idea?
I was just thinking, I was thinking that oftentimes when it comes to religious talks or political talks, we're so convinced on like trying to tell them that we're wrong and trying to convince them that we're right and vice versa. I think that creates a lot of issues, but if we talk about rather like trying to understand each other and understand where the other side's coming from or why they believe what they believe or why they're so passionate about whatever it is they're passionate about, maybe, and even like open that door to like, okay, what are they going to tell me, and then will I consider it and maybe even be convinced of it? I think if we do that, we'll find that there's a lot more similarities and a lot of beliefs than there are differences, and that the polarization is what's ultimately causing the death of not only the country but also religious things in general.
Yeah, absolutely. That feels like Interfaith Work 101, right? Like first start with what's similar, and then you could like work through the more advanced what's different. And so yeah, being able to like start with the similarities is really simple. Thanks. Any other thoughts?
One thought that I had is it's important, like when you are talking about politics, like to or faith, to express your opinion out of like passion for what it is, instead of out of the intent of like convincing someone else or trying to convert someone else, right? And we talked about how oftentimes people come from different faiths and different political views. It's because of culture too, that's a big part of it. So seeking to understand their culture and looking for ways to understand like their art, their food, their like whatever it may be, like can kind of ease that burden of politics, and it kind of gives a mutual respect view and just a way to be able to express opinions rather than like a debate, right? Trying to convince the other side.
Yeah, what I really like about that is I think we're really used to, you hear someone has a different opinion than you. We're not used to being like, where did that come from? And to like go a little bit deeper down the line of it. We just like focus on that is so different from what I thought. But to like follow that line of where did that come from and like understand where they got that is really helpful.
Yeah, to kind of build off of that actually, I feel like when we're talking about faith and politics, we're really just discussing people's upbringings. That's really all we're doing. We're just figuring out upbringings and figuring out patterns and how we can relate to it. And just recognizing that that's the pure motive of it. I think there are obviously, I mean, you know, with this question, when you wrote it, I'm sure you knew a lot of risks and the opportunities that it has. But when you kind of recognize that what we're doing is we're just trying to figure out what happened to them, where did they come from, what's their upbringing, then it kind of creates like a common sense of, you know, unity.
Yeah, it brings like the humanity. Thanks.
You know, you talked about how when you're in a group like this and talking about these things, like it's not really even worth trying to like hide your, or you know, to appear as what's the word? Basically in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But something that I've definitely experienced and heard of a lot of people having similar experiences is that just in any setting, when like a political topic arises, it's very common for people to talk in a way that it almost seems like they assume you think the same way that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And the natural response is to be quiet. You know, just to not say anything, because you're like, oh, they obviously, they think that I think the same way they do, and I don't. And this is kind of awkward. I'm just not going to say anything.
So what do you do in that case?
I don't know. I mean, while you can't like just not share your opinions, I think it's super important to be mindful of like the assumptions you make about other people. I know all the time, personally, whenever I see people of differing opinions talk about what I believe, clearly they have no idea why I believe those things. And they, you know, have all sorts of, you know, to me, very strange ideas about why I have, you know, the beliefs that I do, or people like me have those beliefs. And I think it's just important to, I don't know how you go about doing it, but just recognizing the assumptions you're making while sharing your side, not in a way of, you know, this is how everyone normal thinks, right? But rather just of, this is what I think and here's why I believe this.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just to close for time, I want to thank you guys for participating, and I want to end with my final thought and my plea to make these connections, take the time. It's what I've learned in my last few years, getting so engaged in this work, like you've all shared. There are so many commonalities, and we can handle the differences. We are resilient people, we can do it. But first, take the time to have fun with these different perspectives, cultures, and enjoy sharing who you are with each other. And yeah, I'm very proud of BYU, and I think that BYU is doing a lot in this space, so I hope you find ways to get involved here on campus. Thank you guys so much.